Hey everybody, Andy Hamilton of Trackwrestling joined via video conference by two-time All-American Ray Brinzer, placed third at the 1993 and 1995 NCAA championships. The 1995 team, of course, been part of our Dynasty Duels project. Ray, welcome in. Thanks for taking the time. Greatly appreciate it.
No trouble.
Well, it's been 15 years since the last time we spoke. I wrote a Where Are They Now feature on Ray Brinzer back in 2005 for the Iowa City Press Citizen. To this day, one of my all-time favorite stories. And memory serves me correct, I led that story off with something along the lines of Ray Brinzer still wants to own his own country. He's serious about it. Do you still want to own your own country, Ray? Do you still have ambitions of finding something in the South Pacific?
Um, Not much actually. I'm probably a little more energetic at that point. Responsibility is probably more than I'm looking for at this point. So, no, I'm happy the country had won, really.
Well, back in 1995, Brinzer Mania was in full force at the University of Iowa. That NCAA championships, the autograph line was out of control. What do you remember about how far that autograph line went around in Carver Hawkeye Arena, how deep it was, how many autographs you signed, and were you taken aback by it? What do you think about it now, looking back on it?
Well, by that point, I was used to it. So what what was happening was I would get off of a mat, I would get off of my match, and I would go off the mat and over to the stands, and I would sign autographs pretty much continuously until my next match, which was fun. Honestly, I didn't feel like I needed to do a lot of prep. Once I'm warm, I'm good, and it gives some value to other people. Wrestling's a pretty selfish sport overall, and you spend most of your time being very greedy, which I like. But it's nice to have some kind of involvement with the community and to feel like you're actually doing something for somebody else. And when you got a bunch of kids, especially many of them are themselves young wrestlers. Um, you know, what better time to use for my time? It's like I wasn't going to do anything more important than that. So yeah, but it was pretty much signing autograph the entire weekend.
Back at that point, I mean, there were times during your career where, and other people have said this too, where you were as much of a cult hero in Iowa as Dan Gable. Why do you think that was? What made Ray Brinzer so popular during that time?
Well, I mean, there's a sense in which, if you want to know why people like me, I'm maybe the worst person to ask because ask them. But if I had to guess, I would say partly because I really liked what I was doing, and I think people identify with that, and a lot of people really wish they liked what they were doing, so when they see somebody that's really getting to do exactly what they want, I think that's kind of inspiring. I think there's probably an element of it that I didn't think I was better than they were. Like I didn't feel like I was above my fans. I mean, there are plenty of people that I got to meet that were fans of mine who were themselves really impressive people. They just weren't stars, but it'd be like, a pediatric surgeons and Jesuit priests and who knew like 7 languages and you guys are really interesting. There are some people out there that, okay, who are my fans? I mean, this guy saves small children's lives. I throw people on their backs and hold them there. I don't have a sense of superiority about it. And it really sort of puzzled me when people did, because okay, well, sure, the cameras are on us. That doesn't change who we are. I mean, I'm really good at wrestling. Great. I mean, so far in my book, there's nothing better to be good at. But it doesn't make me better than the people that are watching me. So, like, I feel like, and when they were friendly to me, I was friendly to them, and so, you know, I had time for people, and that's probably a lot of it. I mean, you know, and I'm an open-minded person. I try to be pleasant, and, you know, I don't know, and then no counting for taste, for whatever reason, they like me, so.
Iowa City, such an eclectic community. How did you feel like you fit in when you transferred from Oklahoma State up to Iowa?
It was nice. Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't. It was a better fit. You know, not to speak ill of Stillwater, but Iowa City probably was a better fit for me. Yeah, you know, I liked being able to walk around. It was maybe the first time I felt like I fit into a community where you would have, you know, you'd walk through the little square in town and there would be people out playing chess, or there'd be a jazz band playing in the open, or, you know, you get to, you know, I mean, I remember at one point I had a notebook and I was in a jungle gym in the middle of the city, like in the evening, I was writing something, and another college student came up to me and asked if I was writing poetry because his band was looking for lyrics. And I said, well, no, I'm actually not at the moment, sorry. But I mean, it was like, those just interesting people. It had a sense of being a big playground for 20-something people that to pursue, well, both intellectual interests and, you know, honestly, a fair number of them just got drunk, but, you know. But nonetheless, there were some really interesting people doing interesting things, and it was nice that way. You know, you could have conversations with people, and they would surprise you with what they knew, and they would have interesting perspectives. So I liked that a lot.
You mentioned that you didn't need much time for warm up, and you know that story I wrote 15 years ago. In fact, like people had talked about your philosophy on warm ups. It was, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was something along the lines of, if somebody jumps me in a dark alley, I don't have time to warm up. Is that correct?
Well, okay, so there's a sense in which that's the explanation I gave it. And there's some, I mean, I did take that seriously. Let me tell you, when I was in like middle school, I thought I was like a samurai, and like my life was dedicated to personal combat. And like, I mean, I was really in my own little world. But the truth is, I just found I didn't need too much. I was very good at going from, you know, like 0 to 100 just right off the bat. And I'd been through so many tournaments, just like, I mean, I started in second grade, and by third grade, I'm doing 2 tournaments every weekend, all through the winter, and then, you know, it's you know, by 6th grade, it was judo tournaments, and 7th grade, I'm doing freestyle and Greco, and it's like thousands of matches. You just can't warm up for every one of them. I mean, so I got into this, you know, my life was such that wrestling a match was so normal to me. It didn't merit any sort of special treatment. It wasn't like, wow, you know, here's a big deal that I'm going to get ready for. It was like, okay, it's another day, and this is what I do. And so I found that I was really good at just turning it on immediately. And the warming up didn't help me that much. And, you know, it probably would help me a little bit, but certainly by the second match of the day, it seemed insignificant. So, and then there was also the point that I was slightly crazy, and I actually believed the whole business of, like, you know, at some point, somebody is going to, like, things are going to go down, and I'm going to die surrounded by the bodies of my enemies, and, you know, like, I mean, you know, mentally, I think a lot of times good wrestlers live in their own little worlds, and they're not completely connected with this one, and, you know, I mean, that was mine, or part of mine, anyway.
So let's go back to that 1995 tournament. You reach the semis. You lose a close one to Les Gutches. You come back and place third. What are your fondest recollections of that tournament? What do you remember about the battle with Les Gutches?
Well, I don't remember it fondly. So, yeah, this is actually something I've never talked about publicly before. I really I analyzed him pretty well. The big thing, Les was very tough. I'd been wrestling him since high school, and I had the upper hand on him in high school. But he was just tough. He was a strong guy. He was more of a linear wrestler. Not quite as creative, but really solid. And if you did not wrestle a solid match, he would really burn you. But nonetheless, I broke him down, and probably the biggest thing that kept, one hindrance was that he hadn't been scored on the year before, and on the feet anyway. And he was going into this with, and so I didn't have any footage of him getting taken down. And if I had, I think I would have probably have found it a little easier to score. And, I allowed myself to become more tentative and more defensive than I should have. And so really the tipping point of that match, we finally locked up in 50-50. And I was winning because he couldn't ride me. And so I got out easily, and he took neutral, and so I was basically up by a point. And he was getting a little desperate in the third period, I feel. And so we finally locked up, which is a dangerous thing to do. He's very good there, but so am I. I was a Greco wrestler. I don't think that was his first choice. And so we lock up, and we're really sweaty, and I immediately thought, I've got this. I can take him down right now. Because there's a slide by that I hit that goes to the underhook side that only really works when both guys are sweaty. It's a trick that you only pick up in Greco. And I locked it up, and I went, I identified it, and a moment later I said, don't do it, you're winning. And at that very moment, he did the same move to me. He got the takedown, and it changed the match. And so really, the entire thing was decided in under 2 seconds. And you know what? That's what I get for not being true to myself in a way, because I'm not a tentative wrestler, and I'm not a person that should be defensive or counting points like that and saying, well, don't go on the offense because you can win you can win a strategic victory here. That's not who I am. And so, hey, you know what? That's what you get. Certainly all credit to him. Les was a great wrestler. But it was like I had that moment where I could have. I feel like if I had hit that without hesitation and with all my heart, I think I would have gotten the takedown. And I didn't, and he did, and that's why he's the champ. So, well.
You, during that time, there were a bunch of prototypical Iowa-style wrestlers. How did you feel like your style played in that Iowa room, and with Gable's philosophy, too?
It was a strange match, but it was a strange match with any room. There really just wasn't a program that remotely resembled what I did. And what Gable gave me was just acceptance. He let me be the way I was. As long as things were working, he was good with it. And, it was a little bit inefficient in a way, because my style at that time was not, all that being in phenomenal shape got me was the ability to do what I did without getting tired. But I wasn't hand fighter, and I wasn't going to go wear people out or anything like that. It just was a different, and it would have, and to try to convert to that style would have been more damage than good for me. I subsequently learned what I should have been doing. I've had plenty of time to study at this point. I've not been off the mat since second grade. Up until now, by the way, let me tell you, this whole quarantine business is killing me because I've been off the mat for a month and it's driving me insane. But, sorry to digress. But it was a weird match, but everybody accepted me because I worked hard, and so and one of the neat things about wrestling is that it allowed me to be friends with close friends with people that I would never have had anything in common with in any other walk of life, so I mean, I'm good friends with the Brinzer brothers. If we were not wrestlers, we wouldn't have anything to do with each other, it'd be we're just not alike in that way, but we developed a really strong mutual respect, and we went through a lot of stuff together. And that goes for a lot of the guys that were around at that time. And it's a neat thing about wrestling that I appreciate a lot because, the natural thing in a lot of ways you wind up segregating yourself and being around other people like you. So if I was going to wrestle, I'd be like an egghead, with all egghead friends, and that's less of a rich life than I would prefer. I like it this way.
That team back in '95, you mentioned the Brinzer brothers. They were at the peak of their international careers at that point, but that '95 team, you had guys like Ironside up and coming, and Joe Williams was redshirting that year, but comes in the lineup the next 3 years and wins 3 national titles. Lincoln McElravy, a 3-timer, 4-time finalist on that team. Joel Sherritt. What do you remember? Jeff McGinnis, multi-time national champ. What do you remember about the day-to-day energy in that practice room and what the scraps were like in the practice room?
Yeah, the energy was great, and that's one of the things that was so precious about the environment was you could really just show up almost any time and get a hard workout in, and you had people that were completely engaged with what they were doing, and that sounds like it should be more common than it is. I have this feeling that people think that Division I, it's this amazing thing, and and especially if you're a Division I All-American or you're in a top 10 team or something like that, then gosh, everybody's there. That's their whole life, and it isn't. Just so many people, very few people, have their heads 100% in the game. That's this is really what they do, and we had that. These guys, they were not brilliant technicians. But they were wrestlers. Just to the core, that's what they were there for. And there was energy and there was excitement, and and it was not unpleasant. It's one of the things that people seem to mistake about Iowa, and the idea of wrestling under Dan Gable it was it must have been chewing rocks every day. Oh God, I hate this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to achieve something. And that wasn't it at all. We loved being there. It was exciting. It was fun. It was not wee ha-ha fun, but very, very satisfying. And it was satisfying to just wear yourself out and be exhausted because you fought that apart. And so those guys were great. It was great to work out with them. And, guys like Lincoln McElravy and the Brinzer brothers, they'd wrestle me. They had no problem with that, there's an expectation I'm not going to, hurt somebody or something, but they're coming after me, and so, and Terry and Troy Steiner, there was a point where I could get out from under anybody in my weight in the NCAA. I just didn't really worry about it. But those guys were 3 and 4 weights down from me, and one of them got legs in. It was I'm going to be 20 or 30 minutes getting out from under them. They were just horrendously annoying, and and were good at what they did, and they were and completely focused focused on it. Like that would be 20 minutes of somebody clinging to your back with no other thought than to continue to do that and try to turn you. You know, like their attention did not wander one tiny bit. That was what they were doing. And so, yeah, it was a good playground. Probably, I mean, I feel like it was the best that we had in this country at the time. Not the best that we could have had, not the best that there could be, but, you know, I mean, as far as the wrestling scene went, I mean, pretty good. And interesting personalities and good people, you know, like, you know, it's a pleasure to be with them.
So, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but 1993, your first year with the Hawkeyes, you went into the postseason 0-0, the Big Ten championships, right? And you wrestled a high school teammate first round. Is that all correct?
Yes, I did. So, so I transferred from Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State did not sign for my release until 2 days before the Big Ten tournament. Part of their penalty, because they had been busted by the NCAA for various things, part of their penalty was that they could not wrestle in the postseason. So I suppose they thought that they were holding me out of the part of the season that they were in, and then I don't know what the reasoning was really, but it worked out great. I mean, I had great workouts. I was enjoying myself. I was very fresh coming into the tournament. I went in 0-0, and I got Matt White from Penn State in a pigtail. Matt was a year ahead of me in high school. We were on the same team in North Allegheny. Great guy, by the way. And it was really just funny because nobody had any idea. I don't think they even had me in the book yet because I was that late in entry. And so I came walking out, and I just saw Matt go look at me and just go like, like no, why, no, what is this, you know? And you know, and I beat him, and that really hurt Penn State's chances for, you know, they were, I think on paper they were supposed to win Big Tens that year, and my parents actually were sitting in the Penn State section, and they didn't know this, and they found out quickly because, you know, there were hard words spoken against me. Foul words, you know, like my parents, like, they will still, like, if you get them going on this, they'll still complain about the things that were said about me. Like, I mean, it was like Gable hired me, and I was a mercenary, and, you know, like, but yeah, that was what happened. I mean, that's the way that went on, you know?
So, as much as your accomplishments, as much as you accomplished at Iowa, as I mentioned, finishing third at the NCAA championships twice, probably as legendary as anything are the stories about Ray Brinzer, and that's, you know, what lasts here 25 years later. People still talking about those things, but you don't mind, let's take a little run through some of these stories. I'm going to bring up some of these things and just let you kind of ad-lib on them. When you moved to Iowa, you lived in was it when you moved right away you lived in a truck outside Carver or on the hill there?
No, so, no, that was actually my senior year.
Okay.
So I moved to Iowa, and everything was relatively normal for a while. Gable actually didn't know that I was there. I was there for a while, and then I started taking summer classes just out of the blue, and, you know, one day I went like, okay, I've been off the mat long enough. I need to go get some workouts. And so I wandered into the arena, and I'm walking down the hall, and I walked past Gable, Mike Chapman, the writer, and I think Randy Lewis. They were going the other way, and they looked at me, and I just went like, hey, you know, and they turned around and looked like somebody said, was that Ray Brinzer? And it's like, I heard he was in Europe or something. And then, you know, but I just, like, that's how much of a walk-on I was. So what wound up happening with the living in the truck was, this too I had never really explained. My father had, I was living with my dad through a lot of my time at Iowa, which I loved. Okay, so I'm a family person, and I don't like being that far detached from everybody. But my dad by my senior year had moved to China for a while, in Wuhan, in fact. We still talk about the virus. So, and in my junior year, I came under the scrutiny of the board and control of athletics at the University of Iowa because I was a very irregular student. I was actually getting pretty decent grades, but I was getting them because I was very carefully picking classes that I could succeed at because I'm not good at certain things, and I'm very, very good at others. So I took, like if you give me a test, like if I can just sit there in the class, listen to what's going on, and take a test, and I can regurgitate everything, and I can understand it, and I'm great at that. If I have a test or a class with a bunch of papers, it's not going to go well. And in addition, by the time a normal 45-minute class would, gosh, this is starting to turn long. I'm sorry, but
it's all right.
By the time a normal 45-minute class would be over, I was just getting warmed up. So what I wound up doing was taking Saturday and evening classes exclusively. And there was a semester in my junior year where I was only in school 2 days a week, but each class was a 3-hour block, and that was just fine with me. Focusing on one thing for 3 hours made me perfectly happy, and I could do it all day long. And and then I would also drop classes after the semester started because if I got into a class and I felt like it wasn't going to go well, I knew I had to get out because it's like, okay, whatever it is about this professor or whatever's going on, I'm not going to succeed at this. Drop the class, pick up a new one. And there were a lot of things like that where I was kind of manipulating things to not manipulating the system in a negative way, but trying to play to my strengths. So then, for whatever reason, all this I get pulled before this board in control of athletics, and these professors are asking me questions, and they seem to think that maybe I was getting favors because I was an athlete or something, and I said, that was clearly not the case. Never, ever had the feeling that was happening. One way or the other, they were just uncomfortable with the way I was doing things, and so they made up a set of rules, and they for me exclusively, and they said, well, okay, we're not going to penalize you, but you're not allowed to drop classes after the semester starts, and you're not allowed to, add, and you're not allowed. Oh, one of the other things was I would take an incomplete on classes, and then make them up within a week or two after the class ended, because again, it just sort of worked for me. And so they actually said you're not allowed to do this, and so I said I essentially knuckled under and said, like, well, look, you guys, you could take away my wrestling, and I can't have that, so fine, I'll do this. And then I wound up doing it anyway. So I had, like, at a certain point, I got through it. Gable and Zaleski were like, Ray, just shut up. Don't make these people mad. Just shut up, And so I went through the semester, and near the end of it, I wanted to take some incompletes, and I had some other things going on, and I said, like, well, look, I tried to do it, and I was actually blocked in the computer system. You weren't allowed to do this. And so I went to the provost's office, and I basically said something along the lines of, hey, I'm not sure you're aware that, you fall under the athletic director in the hierarchy because he makes policy for your students. I'm a liberal arts student, but apparently he outranks you. So and so next thing you know, like everything's unlocked, and like I mean, I think some people are pretty damn unhappy about that. And I'm able to drop class and add classes and do all this stuff like a normal student. And then I got pulled in front of the board again. And they were really unhappy with me, and they took my scholarship away for the first semester of the next year, and I was not allowed to compete for the first semester of the next year. Well, at the same time, my dad had moved to China. I had no money, and I needed to stay in school. And I'm very stubborn about not asking people for help. I probably could have called someone up, and said, well, hey, I need money, but I don't do that. So I had a truck, and I lived in the truck until my dad got home around Christmas. And I just froze my ass off, and I was like, it got so cold that at times I would like go sleep in the art building, or like I was sleeping in Royce Alger's office for a while, but every once in a while the janitors would catch me, and it would be like it was kind of making a big political problem for Gable, and so but I was just homeless, and I mean, when I say I had no money, like there was an apple tree in front of the nursing building, and I would like put a pair of pants over my neck and tie the bottoms off and go climb the tree and like fill the legs with apples so that I had stuff to eat. I mean, and through all this, I'm working, and I'm doing Division I training. I'm working really hard, but it was rough. I mean, I didn't like. Freezing to death in the night, so that's how that worked. I mean, it was an ugly scene, and it makes a good story, but homelessness is not fun. It's maybe not so bad if you live in the South or something, but Iowa City is not the place for it. So.
And during that time, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you had kind of figured out how to get in through the ducts of Carver Hawkeye Arena. You kind of figured out the guts of Carver, right? I mean, how to get around and sneak around in there.
Yeah. So there was this sort of electrical panel in the back near the loading dock that you could just climb through, and I was always a little nervous about trying myself, but I never did. And so yeah, I'd get in there, and once you're in, and so and then I would get up into the wrestling office and I'd be able to hang out there, and then so the neat thing was they had drop ceilings, and you could lock the doors, but you could just pop the tiles out of the ceiling and go over the walls, and so I'd do that, I'd like just move around, get in places, and then I'd get into Gable's office. And like he had letters on his refrigerator, and it's like leave messages, just kind of mess with him. And he used to keep little snacks, So there were a couple times I'd like have some of his cookies or whatever, and then I decided pretty quickly, like, that's no fun. Because it's not strange at all to find your cookies missing. Now, what's really strange is if you find different cookies. So I started bringing cookies, and like he'd have like a little thing of Chips Ahoy or something, and it'd be like happy. I think he rewarded himself with like one cookie at a time. Don't get me wrong, like he wasn't like a cookie fiend or anything. But I so like take his Chips Ahoy and replace it with a half empty thing of Oreos instead, to like, now that's going to confuse them, like somebody took my cookies, no problem. Wait a second, how do, like Gable's such a, straightforward thinker, he'd be like, like, so, but yes, like Carver Hawkeye was my playground, and I was a fairly delinquent sort of person, so I just went all over the place.
So with that in mind, tell me about the time that Metallica came to Iowa City, to Carver Hawkeye Arena.
Yeah. So, yeah, I have to say, some of these things I do sort of wonder about myself. You know, it's like, well, that was kind of theft of services or something like that, but you know, like I just wasn't really worried about that sort of thing at 20 years old or whatever. So I mean, um, so again, it was like Metallica coming to Carver Hawkeye, as far as I was concerned, was like Metallica coming to my house. You know, it's like, this is where I live, this is my place, and all right, so they're my guests. You know, like to meet them. And so I'm rooting around, and I was up. You know, this is one of these times where I'm just exploring the place, and I found this locker upstairs that had T-shirts that said staff on them. I went, oh, well, okay, that seemed like a really useful thing to have. So I'm going to have one of these, you know. And then, you know, Metallica shows up, and I was like, I think I have a plan here. So I showed up, and you know, acted, you know, just like act like you belong there, sort of thing. And next thing, you know, and I had a jacket, so I tied the jacket around my waist, and I had the staff shirt on. Then I went out on the floor, and then pulled the jacket on over the staff shirt, you know, listened to Metallica, and so, oh god, I can't believe I did this in some ways, but so yeah, this was '92 or so, and I really didn't like their newer stuff at that point. I was like you know, more of an '80s Metallica type, and so when they got to the end of the concert, they were playing the newer things. I went, you know, I think it's time to get backstage, and so, you know, I started heading back, and I had an idea of what room that they would be in, the reception room, and I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just going to talk my way past everything, you know, act like you belong there. And so I did. I just walked in, and I was probably within 15 feet of that room. I thought I was going to get through the door. And this fellow who, fortunately, I was not, this was just after I got there. So I was not well known, because after I'd been there a while, anybody would have recognized me immediately. But you know, I went up, and the guy steps up to me and says, "Excuse me, can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm with grounds crew." You know, and he goes, "Yeah, I don't think so. I run grounds crew. Who are you?" And I went, "Oh, all right, excuse me." And I turned around, and I started away, and he just said, "Hey," and I ran really, really fast, and I was a fast runner, and he goes, "Hey, somebody stop that guy." But by the time people were even turning around, I was down the hall, around the corner, and headed for the back door at, like, I mean, nobody was catching me. And then so one of the things that had always struck me was, criminals are really stupid, and they do things in a half-assed way. If you're going to run, just keep running. Do it really hard. And so I ran out the back, down across the street, down to the railroad tracks, and about a mile down the railroad tracks before I stopped. I was like, yeah, they're not catching me. Like, no way. Like, that, nah. You know, like, I'm out of here. And then the next day I like shaved my head, like cut my, you know, shaved everything, and like, you know, decided I needed a new appearance. You know, they were trying to figure out who I was. But you know, that's one of the disappointments to me about Iowa wrestling since then. Is like, you have these guys hunting rabbits in Iowa City or things like this, and they get caught. Like, what is wrong with you? You're an elite athlete. You can't outrun the Iowa City police? Are you serious? Like, just go. I mean, like, if you're gonna do this, like, take some pride in it. You know, like, don't be a slob. You know, like, get away with it. So, anyway, yeah, like, I see these things come up once in a while. I'm like, how did you get caught? Dude, like, come on. So, anyway, yeah, so that's my somewhat shameful, life of crime
How,
type
how,
of thing.
how about the time where you dressed up as a ninja and you sneaked into a teammate's house?
Yeah, that was Rich Catalano, who's still a very good friend of mine. So Rich, I became a life member of the United States Judo Association, and as part of that, I got this, like, my life membership award was a katana, and so I was like, yeah, I got to use this thing. What am I going to do? And so I decided, well, I'm going to be a ninja, and so I got a ninja outfit on, and I'm thinking, like, where do I go? What do I do? It's like, I'll get rich, okay? And so I had a friend drive me over and drop me off, and so I'm doing the whole ninja thing, like I roll out of the car, like sneak over like I'm in the bushes, like, and I get up behind I get to his door or by his chimney actually, and I could stand right under his window, and I knew his house very, very well, and I knew his mom well, and so I knew exactly where to go. And I stood there, and of course I'm doing like the total ninja thing. I think I was probably 16 at this point, and I'm blending into the shadows, or so I believe. And I'm listening to him, and he's talking to this girl, Megan, that he is infatuated with on the phone. And I'm like, okay, this is perfect. And I sneak around to the back of the house, and I try to get the door, and it's locked, and his mom is sleeping on the couch. So I'm like, all right, I'm just doing this. So I sort of tap on the window, and Mrs. Catalano comes over and just opens the door. It's like it does not faze her that there's a ninja at her back door at all. Like she's like, hello? And I said, hi, Mrs. Catalano, it's me. It's like, oh, okay, he's upstairs, And so I just go in, and I climb up the stairs, and I sneak down the hallway, and I stand outside his door, and I listen to the conversation for a while, and he's talking, and I'm trying. So I had this idea about the whole thing. Like, I was going to try to find the most inconspicuous night, the most inconspicuous week, and I'm going to interrupt this conversation at the very moment when it will be most surprising for him. Like, I'm thinking, like, what is the perfect time to do this? And I listen, I like, that's it. Now is my time. And I bust open the door, and I pull the sword off my back. I come in, and I, swing it down and bring it right up to his face. And I feel like I'm betraying Rich by saying this, but so he screams, rolls back on his back, and like puts his arms up and crosses his ankles. And because this is the 80s, the phone is on a springy, stretchy cord, and it flies across the room and hits the wall. And he's screaming, and he's like looking at me, and he's like almost shaking. And after a couple seconds of me not doing anything, goes, Brinzer! And I'm like, yes, Of course, he figures this out. I'm completely masked, but I guess either he recognized me or he figured who else would do this. And so then I went and got the friend who drove me there. And by the time we got back 5 minutes later, Rich is still panting and trying to explain to Megan why he screamed and what all this was. And so, yeah, and I mean that was the big ninja mission.
Two more stories. The Gumby doll. What prompted having the Gumby doll in your corner?
Well, Eddie Murphy, ultimately, but I mean, so, I mean, Gumby was just, see, the thing is, all these stories these are the ones that you've heard of, but like my whole life is like this. Like it's a succession of stuff like this that like every one of them is virtually as interesting as any of these. I mean, I almost like we were in a tornado like 3 days ago, like in a tent. So I mean, like things happen, you know, like and it just seems to be the way things go. But okay, so the Gumby thing, this is a well-known one. Eddie Murphy had this Gumby skit, and I thought, you know, that's pretty cool. I want one for Christmas, and so I asked for one in the 6th grade. I get a Gumby doll for Christmas. It's a foot tall, and it's foam rubber, and so I start packing it around to tournaments because why not? You know, I had my go bag. So this is sort of the interesting thing about the time. Each weekend, you would go to a tournament and you would pick up flyers from the tables to find out where the next tournaments were. Because of course, no internet, not much organization because they're wrestling people, and so you're just, and so sometimes I would get calls at like 5 in the morning, be like, Ray, hey, we're going to a tournament. Do you want to go? And I was like, yes. So, so then you had to have a go bag. You know, it was like you had your bag with all your wrestling gear in it, because at any moment you might just leave for a tournament. So it had shoes, it had everything. It was like grab it and go. And so Gumby found his way into my bag, and so then I, you know, look, you know, and very often I didn't have tournament or I didn't have coaches. So there would be like they don't even let kids wrestle without coaches anymore. I never had a coach. You know, like it was let me say it was the rare occasion. Okay, most often I showed up at these things starting in 3rd grade, and I would like wrestle, and after the match I figured out what I did wrong. You know, like I wasn't gonna have a coach telling me like. So never had, but there were always these chairs there. So it was like, okay, well, you know, one day I've got Gumby and I'm like, you know, getting ready for a match. I'm looking at Gumby, I'm looking at the chair, like, you know, like just stick him in the chair, and you know, like, yeah. And so, and you know, like it was just a joke. It was funny, you know, and so I started, you know. And people started freaking out about it, which made it really funny. Because, you know, middle school wrestlers have a really narrow view of reality. You know, it's like if it's not conventional, they get all weird about it. Like, oh my God, oh, he's got a doll. And so, like, okay, all right, this is working. You know, like I'm getting exactly the response that a 6th grader wants to get from everybody else, which is like, hey, pay attention to me, I'm crazy. And so I'm like, all right, so I'll talk to it, you know, and like, you know, so, you know, it'll be like 2nd period, you know, like, refs ask me what I want, I'm turning around like, wait, all right, you know, like, down, you know, and now, you know, like, this makes 6th grade wrestlers think that, like you're completely insane, and so, you know, it just became a running joke for me, and I put it everywhere. And because my coach, especially because my coach in high school hated it, by God, I was putting it in every picture imaginable because he hated it. Like, and so that was pretty much the Gumby thing, you know. I mean, despite them being known for it, it's such a small thing, you know, like. It just wasn't a big deal, except that I got known for it, and, you know, that was that.
While you're at Iowa, you miss a bus to Minnesota, and you wind up going out along I-80 to the truck stop there and hitchhiking your way up to Minneapolis to make it to meet up with the Hawkeyes. How did that story happen? What led to that idea running through your mind and making you think like that was a good idea to find your way up to Minneapolis?
Well, because it was. I mean, So I had an academic conflict. I had to do some test, and Gable had spelled out for me. Now the funny thing was, Gable was not mad at me at all for this. It just spelled out like, if there's a conflict and you need to take care of your grades, you take care of your grades. Do what you have to do. I'm like, okay. So there was a conflict, and I wound up missing the bus. It was going to be a close call, and I just couldn't make it. So the bus is gone. So I don't have a car at this point. I forget why, but sometimes, very often I didn't. So that's how you got around. I mean, hitchhiking was it was not quite as strange as it is now. And it was not as common as, let's say, the 70s or the 60s, where it was like, throw your thumb out. But I was just like, okay, well, I have a problem. I need to get there. So I'm going to solve it, And I don't, I can't afford a bus or whatever, so I'm just going to go, get a ride. And so I wound up getting there outrageously late, and I'm in the hotel room at like 2 in the morning, and banging, I had to find out which door Gable was, because, this was, once you get there, it doesn't mean you have a place to sleep. And so I'm in a hotel where, I know they're here somewhere. And I asked the lady at the desk, and she points me to Gable, and so, banging on Gable's door, and he comes out, and Brinzer, yeah, I made it. It was I needed a room, And so, I wind up in a room with somebody. But, I mean, again, yeah, it's a story, and it's funny, because it was Iowa, and because Gable was involved in that sort of thing. But I hitchhiked through Europe, and hitchhiked all over the place. Being broke and making things happen anyway was how I grew up. So it was this was no unfamiliar thing to me. I was okay, I got a problem to solve, and time to do it. Because I could have stayed home and missed the meet. That would suck. I don't this is my treat. This is what I do. I want to wrestle, so I'm going to make it happen. So, I mean, that's pretty much all that was. It was very simple.
So after you graduate, you finish up your career with the Hawkeyes, you move on, you move back to Pittsburgh, and you start Angry Fish Wrestling. And the club scene maybe wasn't as prevalent then as it is now, but had some pretty highly credentialed guys that came through that. Can you tell us a little bit about that club and some of the guys that you trained there?
Sure, yeah. So that was a project that I started with Time War. I mean, there were clubs. It's been an ongoing development. I was in a freestyle Greco club when I was in high school, so it's not like they're new, truly, but they were not. They've changed a lot, and I feel like we were part of a wave of sort of a cultural shift that changed that. So there was a point in there was a point just after I had retired, and I was a computer programmer, and I wasn't on the mat, and I got a call from my buddy Ty, who was, of course, he was a 4-time state champ for my high school, and really a phenomenal wrestler who should have done much better in college and just crashed. That's a long story in and of itself. But so he calls me up one morning and says, hey, I've got this practice that I'm running and I can't be there. Can you just go run it for me? I said, yeah, sure, that'd be fun. And so I wind up at Seneca Valley, which is a little high school in western Pennsylvania, and I'm going to run an elementary practice, and I don't know anybody. And so so I just started running what I think of as a good practice. It's going to be high energy, keep the kids busy, keep changing things constantly, work on some gymnastics, work on some wrestling, have them engaged, have fun, and then go home. And so the first thing I see is there's chaos.
You know, obviously Ty had not been there long yet because Ty would never have put up with this. He was very regimented. But I've got kids running all over the place. I'm like, all right, this has to stop. Like, we need order in the room. So I said, all right, everybody, bring it in. So everybody runs in, and I said, okay, I'm Coach Brinzer. Here's how we're going to do things. And I said, you know, the first thing I said was, when I tell you to bring it in, you have 5 seconds to get here. And if you don't get in here, we're going to do push-ups. It's like, okay, let's try this. Everybody go back where you were. They're like, okay, bring it in. And everybody comes running in. Like, I don't care if they do push-ups. It was not truly a punishment, except in a sort of a play sort of way. You know, it was like, it was meant to give them something to be excited about and something to challenge them. Like you've only got 5 seconds, and this is really serious. And so we're doing this, and I'm running what I think is a pretty decent practice. And at a certain point, a parent comes over and says, "Excuse me, Coach Brinzer." I said, "Yeah, what's up?" He said, "Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we have a no push-up policy." And I went, "What? Like, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, the last coach who was here, he was kind of a drill sergeant. And he, ran a lot of the kids off, and we had a meeting as a board. We decided that we wanted to do like more recreational, positive." I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, that's interesting. Excuse me, I got to get these guys." And then I completely ignored him for the rest of practice. You know, it was like, okay, I'm going to pretend like I didn't hear that. And because I'm not going to be here long anyway, I'm just getting out of here. And so I go home and I think, okay, that was good. We had a normal practice, and like everybody seemed to enjoy it, and they think they got something out of it. Great. Well, like 2 days later, Ty called me again at like first thing in the morning, and he goes, these people are what's wrong with America. Like these damn liberals, they're all blah blah blah, and most of them are on your side, but some of these people are blah, I'm like, on my side? What are you talking about? Like, on my side? What is this? And so it turns out that there was this big controversy because some of the parents really loved the practice that I ran. And then some of them were upset because they had this no push-up thing that they were doing. And, it didn't fit what they had in mind. But it sort of brought to light these divisions that had always been within the program. Like they were clearly malcontent before I got there, and this set it off. And so I wound up getting called into a board meeting. I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like, now I'm in a board meeting, talking to people, and everybody voices their concerns about this, and then I'm asked to speak, and I said, well, look, I'm totally in favor of keeping things positive. I think you guys are right. I think you want everybody to have a really good experience with this, and you don't want it to be negative, and you don't want it to be demoralizing. On the other hand, this is a combat sport, and there is a risk of injury the risk of injury is worse if you are not well trained. So we should be making these kids stronger, and I feel like that's a real ethical issue. And I would have a problem. I would have an ethical problem with sending kids out unprepared into competition and feeling that I had not gotten them ready to the extent that it was reasonable to do so. And they, so we get out of this meeting. And we're like, okay, what are we going to do? And I'm there, and I'm, and Ty and the coach, Joe, and we're like, Ty and I basically looked at each other and said, look, if we're going to do anything else, we're going to run our own club, because then the people that want to be there and like the way we do things, they'll be there. And the people that don't like the way we do things, they won't be there, and that's fine. So, because that's the way it should be. If you don't like it, well, there are plenty of programs. Go do one of the other ones. You don't have to like me. You don't have to like the way I do things. And so we created this, and like the name Angry Fish came just off the cuff during that meeting. You know, like they said, yeah, what should we call it? And I said, I don't know, like maybe like the Angry Fish. And Joe looked at me and went like, the what? And Ty went, yes, that's it, the Angry Fish. Of course, the Angry Fish. And Joe was like, what do you mean, of course? Like, what does that mean? Like, I think Joe probably would have named it like, you know, the old like Champions or Olympic whatever, or, you know. So we created a club, and we just basically stuck our flag in the sand and said, here it is, it's a wrestling club, and if you want to be here, you can show up, and it costs this much. And it was a relatively new thing, and it was actually very controversial in a sense, because a lot of people felt, and some still feel, that charging for instruction was unethical or immoral. And there was really strong feelings about this. And now that I don't feel was at all reasonable. What I do think there were also concerns about the problem with clubs potentially undermining school programs. And that is an actual problem. And it's one that I feel we have not really addressed as a community yet. Because we can't have clubs cannibalizing the programs that create the wrestlers that become their customers. So we really need a better relationship there. But the club was very simple. We threw it open and said, hey, who wants to be here? We're going to do this. And we started getting a good reputation. We started off with eight guys. I think Jake Herbert might have been one of the 8, actually, of the very original ones. And by the end of the first year, we had like 12 or 15. But then by the second year, it exploded. And this was strictly in the springtime. It was freestyle and Greco. And so then pretty soon we had like 80 guys. And the people that wound up with us were, so there was Jake Herbert, there was Coleman Scott, we had Jared King, we had Phil Davis, Mr. Wonderful, you know, like Mark McKnight and, you know, there's a lot of really, Matt Torniolo, he's now the coach at Northwestern. I mean, I'm really doing people a disservice by skipping them, because we had a lot of really good guys. But it was a very simple idea. I mean, we went to tournaments, we'd come back and we'd fix the mistakes, and then we'd go to more tournaments. So the biggest thing about this was Ty and I did not have families, and so every weekend we would take the money that we got from the club and spend it on vans to take kids to tournaments, because that's what we wanted to do. And so it was like wrestling road party. And it was like, you know, so it would be like 4 months, and we put together a training cycle, and we beat guys for junior nationals, and, you know, and that was it. I mean, it was like, but truly, like every weekend we were in at least one tournament, and we went on a lot of road trips. Eventually, we even wound up going to Las Vegas. I mean, we really did a lot, and it was time. It was because we had time, and we had money, and we didn't really need to devote those things to anybody, to our kids or anything like that. You know, so it's amazing what you can do when you have a single-minded, determination to do something, and no real concerns about practicality. I mean, that's a lot of ways that's what wrestling requires anyway. Wrestling is a slightly insane goal anyway. Like, why are you doing this? It doesn't pay you. You're not going to, like, it's not like there's a big pot of gold at the end of this. Like, you're working your ass off simply because you like it that much. Now, at this point, thankfully, some of our good guys seem to be getting good support, but still, by and large, like, it's quixotic. I mean, it's, you know, and we were fine with that. And when you are willing to do that and you just don't care, you can do amazing things. And that's what we did. We just, you know, we plowed ahead with it, and we had, I mean, I'll tell you truly, I'm a vastly better coach than I was since I started coaching. And so Jake took the world silver medal and Coleman took a world bronze. They had other really good coaches supporting them after they left us, but we gave them a base that they could work from. We helped them along the way. And yet I'll tell you truly, like, we could have been much better, and I didn't know near as much as I do now, and we do things very differently. So it's like the potential, there's so much potential in this sport. And you get people that, want to do that.
So where are you at now? What are you up to? What's your involvement in the sport these days?
Well, so I coach Monsignor Farrell High School in Staten Island, and they've been kind enough to employ me for this, and so I have the luxury of being a coach, and I'm a computer programmer and stuff, but what I really want to do is wrestle, and so it's a two-way street. I mean, partly I help them, but partly also they're sort of my lab rats, and I get to try things and learn, and I really do. I mean, I like each season, not even each season, each month, I come up with new ideas. I'm like, okay, let's see how this works. Let's see how that works, and we just keep throwing things out there, and I refine the process. We make some pretty good wrestlers. Now the frustration there is we get a lot of ninth graders who have never wrestled before. We really are starting raw, and we're producing people that are really quite good. We're in a race usually with some of our best guys to win states by their senior year. It's like because I mean. There's just a minimum amount of time. It's like if you're the greatest gardener in the world, at the end of the first day you still got a big patch of dirt. I mean, it just doesn't look like anything. It takes there's a minimum time that it takes for people to assimilate the sport, and I feel like we're really doing well with that. But there are just limits on what you can do with that. So that's what I've been doing. It's interesting, it's satisfying. I personally get to wrestle a lot, which is really great. My own style has changed a lot, especially as I get older. Still tinkering.
Well, Ray, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. Taking up way more of your time than I anticipated, but it's been a lot of fun catching up with you. Thank you much for joining us.
No problem. I guess see you in 15 years. And, we can keep doing this every 15 years till one of us kicks off.
Sounds good. Let's schedule it for 2035. Let's put it on the books now.
Good plan. Okay.
Thanks much. Appreciate it.